He leaned in close enough that the cameras couldn't miss it. The ballroom lights turned her black satin dress into a shadow among jewels. 700 people, investors, city officials, board members, pastors with polished smiles, wives who measured worth in carats, watched as Graham Whitlock raised a champagne flute and grinned like a man celebrating his own myth. Then he put his mouth right by her ear and whispered, "You're a placeholder, nothing more." The words didn't sting because they were clever. They stung because his tone carried ownership, like he was reading aloud a fact he'd engraved into her life. His girlfriend stood on his other arm, a sleek brunette in a red gown that looked poured on. A new diamond caught the spotlight when she lifted her hand to wave at the crowd. An engagement ring that didn't belong in this marriage. Not while Evelyn Whitlock still wore her own. Evelyn's ring felt suddenly too heavy, too hot, like metal shame. Behind them, Graham's mother laughed openly, not even bothering to cover it with her napkin. And Graham's younger sister, phone held vertically, thumb hovering over post, zoomed in on Evelyn's face like humiliation was content. On stage, the MC announced the historic promotion, and the screen flashed, "Welcome our new VP of Operations, Serena Vale." Serena, Graham's mistress, tilted her chin and accepted applause like she'd invented air. Evelyn stayed seated, hands folded over a slim leather notebook on her lap. The notebook was scuffed at the corners, the kind of thing you carried when you couldn't afford therapy, when you wrote your plans instead. Inside it were dates, receipts, signatures, and the quiet math of betrayal. Someone at the table leaned toward another guest and murmured, "Is she his assistant?" Evelyn didn't correct them. She stared at the stage, at the company logo she designed years ago, at the motto she wrote when she was 22 and broke and stubborn enough to believe integrity could scale. Build quietly. Stand firmly. Graham didn't know what that notebook really was. He didn't know the company's ownership wasn't a story. It was ink, filings, and a trust he'd never bothered to read. He didn't know the ballroom's security cameras fed into a private AV booth upstairs, where tonight's celebration reel was already cued. Evelyn inhaled slowly, tasting champagne and cruelty, and told herself one truth to keep from shaking. They were laughing because they thought the ending was written. Up in the AV booth, a technician's monitor blinked with a new upload titled "Foundation, Play," at 9:12 p.m. Evelyn Whitlock was 44, and most days she could disappear on purpose. By 5:10 a.m. she was already in the kitchen of the Whitlock house, tying back her hair and moving quietly so she wouldn't wake her daughter, Lila. The coffee maker clicked on, the refrigerator hummed. On the counter sat a stack of unpaid medical bills held together with a rubber band. Her father's heart meds, her mother's physical therapy, the co-pays that never stopped. Evelyn didn't look at them yet. She always waited until after breakfast, as if delaying the numbers could delay the truth. She packed Lila's lunch the way she always did. Apple slices, a turkey sandwich cut into neat triangles, a sticky note with a small drawing of a sun. Not because anyone asked, because Evelyn couldn't stand the idea of her child opening a lunchbox and finding nothing warm inside it. At 6 o'clock, she checked her father's pill organizer and called her mother's home aide to confirm the morning visit. Then she slipped on plain flats and a modest blazer, nothing that would draw attention in a boardroom, nothing that would make people wonder why the CEO's wife was in the building at all. At Sterling Global, she worked under the title Administrative Support. It was a joke printed on a badge. She filed calendars, handled invoices, and brought coffee to meetings where men twice her ego took credit for the systems she designed years ago. She did it with her eyes lowered and her mouth closed, because silence was the only thing her husband couldn't spend. That morning, the elevator mirror caught her face, calm, careful, practiced. Only her wedding ring looked out of place, a bright circle on a hand that had learned to clench without showing it. On her desk sat the same worn leather notebook from the Gala, open to a page of tight handwriting, dates, amounts, names, a record, a map, a promise. Her phone buzzed with a message from Graham. "Don't embarrass me tonight. Wear something simple." Evelyn stared at the screen, feeling a cold pressure settle in her stomach. It wasn't fear exactly. It was recognition, the quiet signal she'd learned to trust the way nurses trust a change in a patient's breathing. Something was off. The timing, the tone, the way his words didn't sound like control anymore. They sounded like preparation. When she looked up, she saw a calendar invite she didn't create. Executive announcement, 9:12 p.m. AV booth access granted. The reason Evelyn couldn't just walk away wasn't love anymore. It was math. Her parents lived 40 minutes outside the city in a worn, one-story house that still smelled like mothballs and Vicks. Her father's heart condition meant monthly prescriptions that cost more than their mortgage used to. Her mother's hip had never healed right after the fall, and the insurance company treated physical therapy like a luxury. Every week, Evelyn drove out after work with groceries, a new set of pill bottles, and a smile she put on like a coat so they wouldn't see the fear underneath. And then there was Lila, 7 years old, asthma, a bright, stubborn kid who called her mom Eve when she wanted to sound grown. The specialist visits weren't optional, the inhalers weren't cheap, and the private school scholarship, Graham's idea, came with strings Evelyn hadn't understood until it was too late. Tuition was covered, but the fees, uniforms, supplies, and fundraising expectations landed on Evelyn's shoulders like hidden weights. Graham kept the bank cards. "It's safer," he'd said, as if Evelyn had ever been reckless. He transferred an allowance every Friday, just enough to keep the fridge full, not enough to build an exit. When Evelyn once asked for extra to cover her mother's therapy, he laughed like she'd asked for a yacht. "Your parents always have a crisis," he'd said. "Stop making them my problem." So Evelyn learned to do what vulnerable women do when the door is locked. She stayed polite while she looked for keys. She kept her admin paycheck untouched in a separate account Graham didn't know existed. She sold her grandmother's brooch and told no one. She skipped new shoes, cut her own hair, repaired Lila's backpack with needle and thread. Every sacrifice became a quiet deposit into freedom. But the biggest trap was the one Graham never even had to say out loud. If she left, he'd call her unstable. He'd tell people she was confused, emotional, ungrateful. He'd use the company's HR files, her low title, her silence, and twist it into proof that she had no authority, no credibility, no standing. And in a courtroom, perception could become custody. That night, as Evelyn tucked Lila into bed, her daughter's small hand found her wedding ring and turned it absently. "Mom," Lila whispered, "why does Dad look at you like he's mad you exist?" Evelyn swallowed hard. "Go to sleep, baby." She walked into the hallway and saw a new envelope taped to the front door. No return address, only her name printed in block letters. Inside was a custody attorney's business card and a sticky note. "He's already filing." The Grand Meridian Hotel looked like a jewel box from the street. Glass doors, doormen in black coats, valet lights washing the sidewalk in gold. Inside, the anniversary gala was already humming. A string quartet played near the fountain. Women in satin drifted past marble columns like perfume had weight. Men in tuxedos laughed too loud, the way people do when money is watching. Evelyn entered through the side corridor reserved for staff and spouses, because Graham insisted it was faster. The irony tasted bitter. She owned nothing on paper in the eyes of this room, yet she could trace every inch of Sterling Global's rise back to nights she spent coding with cold coffee and shaking hands. A young event coordinator clipped a badge onto Evelyn's dress without looking up. "Mrs. Whitlock, you're seated at table 12. Program starts at 9. Then she pointed, brisk and practiced, toward a ballroom door guarded by security. Evelyn walked in, and the room swallowed her. 700 guests filled round tables under chandeliers that scattered light like broken ice. At the front, a stage gleamed. A massive screen hung behind it, cycling through glossy photos. Graham shaking hands, Graham cutting ribbons, Graham leading. The microphone at the podium was perfectly centered, polished, waiting. Evelyn's eyes moved automatically. Exit doors. camera domes in the ceiling corners, the AV booth window upstairs. She spotted a thin black cable snaking under the stage skirt, taped down like a secret. At table 12, a place card read, Evelyn Whitlock, admin support. Not wife, not partner, not even guest, just a title meant to shrink her in print. She sat and placed her worn leather notebook on her lap. Her fingertips found its edges the way someone might touch a rosary. Across the room, a few employees glanced her way, then looked past her, already trained to treat her as background. Then the ballroom doors opened again. Graham stepped in with Serena on his arm. But something was different tonight. He wasn't smiling at everyone. He wasn't working the room with that easy charm. His jaw was tight, eyes scanning the crowd like he was checking for threats. He leaned toward Serena and said something Evelyn couldn't hear. Serena nodded quickly, almost nervous, then smoothed her dress like she'd been warned. Graham's mother and sister followed behind them, his sister already filming. Evelyn felt the air shift, subtle but real, like the moment before a storm breaks. Graham didn't come to greet the guests. He walked straight toward the AV booth stairs, and the security guard moved aside like he'd been ordered to. Graham Whitlock had learned early that charm was cheaper than honesty. He was 46, tall, polished, and always just loud enough to be heard without sounding desperate. In public, he played the role of the visionary husband, the man who built Sterling Global with grit and sleepless nights. In private, he treated Evelyn like a resource he'd acquired and now managed. That afternoon, right before the gala, he cornered her in the hallway outside the executive suite, where the carpet was thicker and the doors closed softer. "Hand me your phone," he said, not asking. Evelyn's fingers tightened around it. "Why?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because you're unpredictable when you get emotional." She knew the script. If she resisted, he'd call her unstable. If she complied, he'd call it proof he was right. Evelyn unlocked the screen and held it out anyway, because the stakes weren't pride. The stakes were Lila's school, her parents' prescriptions, the mortgage Graham insisted was his responsibility, even though her signature was buried under every real financial document. Graham scrolled through her messages with practiced ease, thumbs moving like he owned not just the device, but her entire life. He deleted a thread from Marcus, one older message, harmless on its face, but Graham didn't like anything he didn't control. "You're not allowed to talk to him," Graham said. "He's my friend." Graham leaned closer. "You don't get friends. Friends give you ideas." Then he pulled out his wallet and slid a single credit card between two fingers like he was feeding a stray animal. "This is for tonight," he said. "Don't use it unless I tell you." Evelyn stared at the card. "I need to refill my mother's prescription tomorrow." Graham exhaled like she was exhausting. "Your parents drain you, Evelyn. I'm trying to protect you from them." Protect, the word he used every time he tightened the leash. Behind him, the door to the executive suite opened. Serena stepped out, flawlessly made up, eyes bright with a thrill she wasn't even trying to hide. She didn't greet Evelyn. She didn't have to. Graham had already taught everyone in his orbit that Evelyn was background noise. Serena slipped her hand into Graham's arm. "They're ready for you," she said softly. Graham turned back to Evelyn, smile returning like a mask, snapping into place. "Remember," he murmured, "be quiet, be grateful. Don't embarrass me." He walked away with Serena, leaving Evelyn in the corridor, holding a credit card she wasn't allowed to use, feeling the cold truth settle into her bones. Tonight wasn't a celebration. It was a performance, one he planned. As Graham disappeared into the ballroom, Evelyn's phone lit up with a new bank alert. Account access updated. Primary user, Graham Whitlock. Serena Vale wasn't an accident. She was a decision, hand-picked, polished, and planted. Evelyn had first seen her name in a forwarded email chain 3 months ago. "Serena is a perfect fit," Graham wrote to HR, copying the board distribution list like he wanted the whole company to witness his taste. Strong presence, executive energy. Evelyn remembered staring at the signature line and realizing he hadn't used his usual language. Someone had coached him, or Serena had. Now, at the gala, Serena moved through the ballroom as if she'd already been crowned. She didn't cling to Graham's arm the way mistresses usually did when they feared being discovered. She walked half a step ahead, greeting investors by first name, touching elbows lightly, laughing at jokes before they landed. She knew the room. She'd studied it. Evelyn's pulse stayed slow, but her mind worked fast. Serena stopped at Lorraine Whitlock's table.
Graham's mother rose to hug her,
All warmth and approval, like Serena was family, not a girlfriend, not a new hire. Family. Lorraine's eyes slid past Evelyn in the back, then returned to Serena with satisfied pride. Shanice, Graham's sister, angled her phone discreetly, recording Serena from head to toe. She whispered, loud enough to be heard by the table behind her, "This is what a real executive looks like." The women nearby giggled. A man in a tux murmured, "Graham traded up." Evelyn's throat tightened, not because she believed them, but because they were watching her daughter's future get gambled on like a sport. Every laugh was a vote against her credibility. Every clip Shanice posted would become a weapon if Graham ever walked into court claiming Evelyn was unstable and jealous. Serena finally turned, scanning the room. Her gaze landed on Evelyn's table and held, not confused, not curious, sharp. She walked over, heels quiet on the carpet, and stopped beside Evelyn's chair like she was visiting a subordinate. "You're Evelyn," Serena said, smiling politely. "Graham's wife." Evelyn met her eyes. "And you're Serena. Congratulations." Serena's smile widened just a fraction, as if she'd been waiting for acknowledgement. "Thank you. I'm stepping into a role that needs discipline, boundaries. Not everyone can handle that." Evelyn's fingers pressed lightly against the leather notebook. "True." Serena leaned closer, voice lowering. "I'd keep your night simple if I were you. Big announcements tend to overwhelm people who aren't used to being seen." Then she straightened and walked away, like she delivered a warning, not a conversation. Evelyn watched her return to Graham, watched Graham place a hand at Serena's lower back, possessive and proud, and in that moment, Evelyn understood. Serena wasn't just sleeping with her husband, she was helping him rewrite the story. From the next table, an older board member whispered, "She already has the badge, VP access, starting tonight." Evelyn didn't move when the first jab landed, she just let it hit and pass through her like cold air, because reacting was what they wanted. Lorraine Whitlock drifted to table 12 with the smooth confidence of a woman who'd never paid her own bills. Her diamonds flashed as she leaned down, lips painted the color of expensive cruelty. "Well," Lorraine said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "I suppose they let you sit close to the kitchen so you can feel useful." A few people chuckled politely, the way guests do when they don't want to offend power. Shanice hovered behind her mother, phone lifted, recording from an angle that made Evelyn look small. Evelyn kept her hands folded over the leather notebook on her lap. "Good evening, Lorraine." Lorraine's smile sharpened. "Still so polite. It's almost impressive. You know, the wives of real executives usually have, how do I say it, presence. But you've always been background." Shanice laughed and flicked her hair. "Mom, don't be mean. She's doing her best. Some people just aren't built for the spotlight." Evelyn felt heat crawl up her neck, not because she believed them, but because this was public. This was being reduced to a punchline in the company she bled for. Across the aisle, two employees whispered and glanced over, their faces split between discomfort and curiosity. Lorraine tapped Evelyn's place card with one manicured nail. "Admin support." "They even printed it for you," she said. "How thoughtful." Evelyn's wedding ring caught the chandelier light. For a split second, she imagined taking it off and letting it clink onto the table like a verdict. Instead, she breathed in, slow and steady. "I'm fine where I am," Evelyn said. Lorraine leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to sound intimate instead of loud. "You won't be fine much longer. Graham is finally fixing the mistake he made marrying you." Evelyn's stomach tightened. Mistake. Fixing. The words were chosen. Planned. Shanice stepped in, smiling sweetly for her camera. "Smile, Evelyn. It's a celebration. People love a redemption story." Lorraine straightened, satisfied, and swept away with Shanice trailing behind, already typing a caption. Evelyn stayed seated, face calm, but her pulse thudded behind her eyes. She rose a minute later and slipped toward the hallway near the restrooms, needing air that didn't taste like perfume and poison. As she passed the service corridor, she heard voices, male, low, urgent. "Make sure she signs it," Graham said. Another man replied, "If she refuses, the custody angle works. We've got Lorraine and Shanice ready to testify." Evelyn's breath caught. She pressed herself against the wall, unseen in the dim corridor, listening. Then Graham said, "At 9:12, cut her access and play the clip. She won't even understand what hit her." Evelyn didn't rush back to the ballroom. Rushing would look like guilt, and Graham loved turning normal reactions into proof she was unstable. She stayed in the corridor, breathing through the tightness in her chest until her hands stopped trembling. Then she did the one thing she'd trained herself to do for years. She observed. Details were safer than feelings. The service hallway was dim, lined with linen carts and stacked banquet chairs. A security camera sat above the exit sign, its tiny red light blinking steadily. Evelyn tilted her head just enough to confirm the angle. It covered the doorway, the corridor bend, and the section where Graham had just spoken about signing and cutting her access. Good. Not magic. Not luck. Standard hotel security. She walked to the nearest staff station like she belonged there. A young hotel employee stood beside a rolling cart of champagne flutes, adjusting place cards. "Excuse me," Evelyn said softly. "Who oversees security footage tonight?" The employee glanced at her badge, admin support, and relaxed, assuming she was harmless. "Hotel security, Mr. Pritchard. Office is down the hall, second door." Evelyn thanked her and kept walking, steady and quiet. At the second door she heard multiple voices. A man's deeper tone, calm, authoritative, and another voice she recognized instantly, Graham's event coordinator. "We were told to restrict AV access to one guest," the coordinator said. "Evelyn Whitlock." The deeper voice replied, "That request came from Mr. Whitlock's office, yes, but hotel policy requires written authorization." Evelyn's stomach turned. Written authorization meant there was paperwork. Paper left trails. She didn't knock. She took 2 steps back and pulled out her phone. Not to call, not to text. To open the voice memo app and slide the record button. She held the phone at her side, screen dimmed, and walked past the slightly open door as if she was lost. "Print the denial slip," the coordinator was saying, frustration sharp. "We need it on file in case she makes a scene." The deeper voice sighed. "Ma'am, if she's on the guest list, she has access unless the request is legally binding." A pause. Then the coordinator, quieter. "He said she's not a real executive. He said she's a liability." Evelyn kept walking, heart hammering, but her steps didn't change. Her phone continued recording until she reached the corner, where the hallway opened into a small alcove with a locked supply closet and a framed fire escape plan. She stopped, thumb hovering over "save." The recording had names, roles, and the exact phrase Graham wanted repeated. "She's a liability." That was the seed, the first clean thread she could pull in front of witnesses. Evelyn saved the file and renamed it with a timestamp, 8:41 p.m. Security/AV. Then her phone buzzed again. An email notification this time, subject line in bold. "Notice of access termination, effective 9:12 p.m. And beneath it, a CC list that included the entire board. Evelyn returned to the ballroom just as the program shifted into its formal half. Lights dimming, servers clearing plates, the room settling into that attentive hush where power could speak and nobody interrupted. She sat again at table 12, shoulders relaxed, face neutral. Inside, she was counting minutes. 9:05, 9:08, 9:10. Graham reappeared from the AV booth stairs, walking with a confidence that looked rehearsed. Serena stayed close, but not touching him now, like she'd been instructed to keep her hands clean. Lorraine and Shanice watched from their prime table near the stage, smug as if they'd already seen the ending. Then Graham approached Evelyn's table with a man she didn't recognize, mid-50s, grey suit, leather portfolio tucked under his arm. Not a guest, not an investor, someone professional. "Evelyn," Graham said smoothly, Step into the side lounge. We need a quick signature before the announcements." Evelyn didn't stand right away. "What is it?" Graham's smile tightened. "Routine, an acknowledgement. Don't make this harder." The man in the grey suit gave a small, practiced nod. "Mrs. Whitlock, it's a standard document confirming you have no executive authority and no access to proprietary materials. It protects the company." "The company?" Evelyn looked at Graham. "Why now?" "Because," Graham whispered, lowering his voice as if he was being kind, "you've been acting odd lately. People are noticing. I'm trying to keep you from embarrassing yourself." There it was again, his favorite move, turn her dignity into a liability. He gestured toward the hallway. 2 hotel security guards, previously near the ballroom entrance, subtly shifted position. Not aggressive, just present. A message without words. No scene. No exit. Evelyn stood, slow and controlled, and followed them into the side lounge, where the music softened and the laughter from the ballroom sounded far away. On a small table sat a single-page document with highlighted lines. A pen waited like a trap. The grey suit man opened his portfolio. "If you sign here, Mr. Whitlock will ensure you receive a settlement in the event of changes, housing support, continued school tuition for Lila." Evelyn's throat tightened at her daughter's name. Graham watched her face like a hunter watching a cornered animal. "And if I don't?" Evelyn asked. Graham leaned in. "Then I file for emergency custody tomorrow morning. My lawyer already has the statement drafts. My mother and sister will swear you're unstable. And you know what judges do when a woman can't prove her own stability." Evelyn stared at the pen. Her fingers didn't reach for it, because she finally understood. The signature wasn't paperwork. It was a muzzle. Behind Graham's shoulder, the lounge TV flickered on by itself, showing a paused video file labeled "Evelyn Whitlock, play at 9:12. The clock on the lounge wall flipped to 9:12 like it was counting down to an execution. The paused file on the TV vanished, replaced by a bright title card. "Company Security Review. Subject, Evelyn Whitlock." Beneath it, a photo of Evelyn taken from the lobby camera, her walking alone, head slightly bowed, made her look guilty before anyone heard a word. Graham exhaled, satisfied. "There," he said softly. "Now you understand why we needed the signature." The video began to play, but it wasn't what Evelyn expected. It wasn't bank records. It wasn't proof. It was curated humiliation. A clipped montage of her quietest moments, her sitting in the back of board meetings, her taking notes, her handing a folder to an executive, her wiping coffee off a conference table. Normal work, edited into a narrative of insignificance. A new caption flashed across the screen. "Admin support, no executive authority." The grey suit man slid the paper closer. "Sign," he urged, "and we keep this private." Graham opened the lounge door with a flourish, as if he was ushering her into a courtroom. "No," he corrected. "We make sure everyone understands who you are." He guided Evelyn back into the ballroom at the exact moment the MC announced, "And now, a special presentation celebrating leadership." The big screen behind the stage lit up with the same title card from the lounge. Gasps rippled through 700 seats. Heads turned, phones lifted. Lorraine's smile spread like a stain. Shanice angled her camera to catch Evelyn entering. Perfect timing, perfect cruelty. Graham stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. "I want to address a sensitive matter," he said, voice warm and practiced. "For years, my wife has insisted she has involvement beyond her role. Tonight, for the sake of transparency, the board requested this review." Laughter, nervous at first, then crueler as Lorraine clapped. Serena stood at the edge of the stage, chin high, like she'd already won the crown. Evelyn stood frozen in the aisle, her wedding ring suddenly feeling like a brand. She saw employees she'd helped hire, staring as if they'd never seen her before. She saw investors whisper. She heard someone say, "He married his assistant." Graham lowered his voice, intimate and lethal. "Evelyn, sign the document now, or I file custody tomorrow morning. In front of everyone."
"I'll tell them why you're unfit."
Evelyn lifted her chin. Her hands didn't shake. Then a chair scraped loudly near the front row. An older woman with silver hair stood up and said, "Mr. Whitlock, turn that video off. You're about to commit fraud in front of witnesses." The ballroom didn't explode into chaos. It froze first, like 700 people collectively forgot how to breathe. Graham's hand tightened around the microphone. His smile twitched, trying to stay in place. "Ma'am," he said lightly, as if correcting a confused aunt, "this is a private company matter." The silver-haired woman didn't sit. She stood straight, shoulders squared, the kind of posture you got from decades of being the calmest person in the room. "Private?" she repeated. "You're projecting a defamatory reel onto a public screen at a contracted event, in front of board members, press, and investors. That's not private. That's reckless." Whispers spread like wind through dry grass. Who is she? Board chair? Is he serious right now? Is that his wife? Phones lifted higher. Shanice kept filming, but her grin faltered, her eyes darting between the screen and the woman who'd just challenged Graham on his own stage. Lorraine's face tightened into that hard, offended mask of someone who'd never been told no in public. Evelyn felt the stares land on her like stones. She could read them even without hearing the words. Pity, suspicion, entertainment. A woman at a nearby table leaned to her husband. "If she's just admin, why would he do this?" A man answered, "Maybe she's unstable. He's trying to protect the company." Protect. The same word Graham used when he cut off her money, when he held custody over her head, when he turned her silence into evidence against her. Evelyn's cheeks burned, but she didn't shrink. She focused on tangible things. The cold edge of the notebook against her palm, the weight of her wedding ring, the blink of the ceiling camera above the exit. Proof. Witnesses. Real details that didn't care about anyone's opinions. Graham tried to laugh. "Everyone, let's not overreact. This is simply transparency. My wife has made claims." "Your wife has made claims," the silver-haired woman cut in, "and your response is to humiliate her publicly while offering her a document to sign backstage? That's not transparency, that's coercion." That word, coercion, hit the crowd differently. People shifted in their seats. A few faces hardened. Even some of Graham's supporters looked uneasy now, like they'd suddenly realized they were clapping at something ugly. Evelyn's throat tightened with shame, but beneath it came something else, quiet, rising resolve. Because for the first time tonight, someone credible had said out loud what Graham had been doing in the dark. And then, the silver-haired woman turned to Evelyn and said, "If you're ready, Mrs. Whitlock, tell them who you really are, because I brought the file." Evelyn didn't remember walking out of the ballroom, only the sudden hush behind her and the way the chandeliers blurred into streaks of light. She kept moving until the music became muffled and the air stopped smelling like champagne. She found a service stairwell near the kitchen, grey walls, metal steps, a single fluorescent bulb that flickered like it couldn't decide whether to stay on. It was the first place all night that didn't ask her to perform. Her knees gave out on the second step. She sat down hard, clutching the leather notebook to her chest like it was the only thing in the world that was still true. Her breath came in short, ugly pulls. Not sobbing yet, her body was still fighting that, still trying to stay dignified. Then she saw her hands, the wedding ring, the same ring she'd worn while packing lunches, while wiping her mother's countertops, while pretending in boardrooms that she didn't understand how her own company worked. Tonight, under the ballroom lights, it had looked like proof she belonged. Now, it looked like evidence she'd stayed too long. A muffled laugh echoed from the hallway, someone joking about the CEO's assistant. Evelyn's stomach twisted. She pressed her forehead against the notebook. For a second she wanted to vanish, to be small enough that nobody could find her, judge her, take from her. But then Lila's face flashed in her mind, her daughter turning that ring like it was a toy, asking why Dad looked at Mom like he was mad she existed. Evelyn's throat tightened, and the tears finally came. Quiet at first, then violent, unstoppable. She covered her mouth so no one would hear her breaking apart in a stairwell like a disposable employee. "I'm done begging," she whispered into the dark. The words didn't sound dramatic. They sounded factual, like a decision signed in ink. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and forced her breathing to slow. She couldn't afford to fall apart for long. Graham had lawyers. Graham had Lorraine and Shanice ready to lie. Graham had a stage.
But Evelyn had something he didn't respect enough to fear: patience with teeth.
She opened the notebook and flipped to a page marked with a folded corner. Dates, amounts, names. A small note she'd written weeks ago. If he ever threatens Lila, call M immediately. Her phone was still in her clutch. She stared at it, thumb hovering over Marcus's contact. Her hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't helplessness. It was rage turning into aim. A shadow moved at the top of the stairwell. Evelyn froze, listening. A shoe scuffed. Someone paused, as if they were looking down. Then her phone buzzed with one incoming call. Marcus Webb, and a text beneath it. Evelyn, I saw the screen. Don't move. I'm coming to you with proof. Marcus found her in the stairwell, like he'd been tracking a wildfire. He was breathless, tie loosened,
Suit jacket open,
eyes sharp, with a kind of focus that meant he'd already moved from sympathy to strategy. He crouched beside her on the metal steps and kept his voice low. Evelyn, look at me, he said. You're not crazy, and you're not alone. Evelyn wiped her face fast, ashamed of the tears even though she shouldn't have been. He's going to take Lila, she whispered. He said tomorrow morning. Marcus shook his head once. He can try, but he's also doing something else tonight, and it's going to cost you if we don't move. What? Her voice cracked. Your access is already being cut, Marcus said. He pulled out his phone and turned it so she could see the screen. A bank notification, a corporate system alert, an email thread moving too fast to read. They're locking you out of the payroll portal, your badge, your medical benefits, everything tied to Sterling Global. They're building a paper trail that says you're terminated for misconduct, so a judge sees you as unstable and unemployed. Evelyn's stomach dropped. My parents' prescriptions. I know, Marcus said, and Lila's inhalers, and the tuition. That's the point. They're taking away your support, so you'll sign whatever they put in front of you. Evelyn stood, knees shaking. I have to go back. If I don't, he'll control the story. You go back, he'll control your face on camera, Marcus said. He wants you crying. He wants you begging. That becomes Exhibit A. As if the universe wanted to prove Marcus right, Evelyn's phone buzzed. A text from Graham. You left the room. That tells everyone you're guilty. Come sign it. Now. Then another buzz, her mother's homemade. Mrs. Whitlock, the pharmacy called.
The card on file was declined.
I don't know what to do. Evelyn's throat tightened so hard she could barely breathe. She felt the world narrowing to a single cruel fact. Graham could hurt her without touching her. Marcus stepped closer. This is your lowest point by design, he said, voice steady. He's counting on you folding. Evelyn stared down at her wedding ring. She slid it halfway off, then stopped, not ready to let it go yet. Not because she wanted Graham, because she wanted proof she'd once believed in something good. I have something, she whispered, tapping the leather notebook against her chest. Dates, notes, patterns. That's not enough, Marcus said. Not for board members, not for a courtroom. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a slim flash drive and a folded document.
I didn't come empty-handed, he said.
I saw everything, and I brought what actually matters. He unfolded the paper, and at the top, Evelyn saw the words, Sterling Global, Original Incorporation Filings, signed by Evelyn Hart, founder. Marcus didn't let Evelyn spiral. He didn't even let her sit still. He guided her out of the stairwell and into a quiet service office behind the ballroom, the kind of place hotels used for lost and found and emergency radios. A laminated evacuation map hung crookedly on the wall. A half-empty box of pens sat on a metal shelf. Ordinary objects in an extraordinary night. Marcus set his phone on the table and pulled up 3 folders like he'd been building a case in his head for years. We're not going to argue with opinions, he said. We're going to bury him with documents. Evelyn swallowed.
He has the mic. He has the crowd.
Crowds follow proof, Marcus replied. and older boards follow liability. He slid the incorporation filings toward her again, clean scans, county stamp visible, her maiden name printed in black ink. "This establishes you as founder," he said. "Not admin, not wife, founder." Next came a trust document with a signature block that made Evelyn's heart pound. "Voting shares," Marcus continued, tapping the line. "Held by a trust you control." Graham never read it because he assumed marriage was ownership. Evelyn's hands tightened around the paper. It felt unreal, like holding her own pulse outside her body. Marcus opened the flash drive case. "Now the money. I pulled corporate bank logs and the shell company trail. He's been moving funds in small increments. Not genius, just arrogant." He looked up. "If you show embezzlement, Ashford backs away. If Ashford backs away, the board panics, and panic makes people listen." Evelyn whispered, "He threatened custody." "I handled that," Marcus said, voice hardening. "His custody attorney has a conflict. I'm filing an emergency stay. He can threaten you, but he can't rush a judge with dirty counsel." Evelyn felt something loosen in her chest, one knot unclenching. Marcus pulled up her saved audio file, 8:41 p.m., the coordinator and security discussing restricting access and calling her a liability. "This proves coordination," he said, "and it gives us names." Evelyn blinked. "But he can still spin it. He can say I'm lying." "That's why we need a confirmer," Marcus said, "someone the room already respects." As if summoned, his phone buzzed. He answered on the first ring. "Helen." He listened, then handed the phone to Evelyn. A calm, older voice came through. "Mrs. Whitlock," Helen said, "I saw what he did on that screen. I'm coming downstairs with the board minutes and the authorization log. If he tries to cut you off at 9:12, I want the room to see who approved it." Evelyn's throat tightened. "Thank you." Helen's voice stayed steady. "Don't thank me yet. One final piece will end this." Evelyn looked at Marcus. "What final piece?" Marcus's eyes flicked to the ceiling camera outside the office door. He said, "The hotel security footage, showing Graham ordering the AV booth to play that reel." Marcus moved like a man who'd spent his life cleaning up other people's messes and hated that Evelyn had ever been forced to live inside one. He made 2 calls from the service office. The first was to Helen, the silver-haired board chair. The second was to hotel security. Evelyn listened, still dizzy from the swing between shame and possibility. The ballroom noise leaked through the walls, applause fading, murmurs rising, Graham trying to keep control with a microphone and a smile that was cracking at the edges. Marcus turned back to her. "We're going to build a chain, not feelings, not stories, a chain." He laid out the documents again, this time in a clean order. Incorporation filings, trust voting shares, bank logs showing transfers, the AV restriction email, CC'd to the board, and her saved audio from 8:41. Each piece was a brick. Together, they became a wall. Evelyn's fingers hovered over the audio file on her phone. "Will this actually matter?" she asked. "It matters because it has names," Marcus said, "and timestamps, and hotel policy. Graham can lie, but he can't lie over a paper trail that belongs to other institutions." A knock came at the door. Marcus opened it a crack and spoke quietly to a uniformed man with a security badge. The man nodded, serious, then handed Marcus a printed log sheet. "Access history," Marcus murmured, scanning it. "A V-booth door. Keycard swipes. Perfect." Evelyn's heartbeat stumbled. "That shows he went up there?" "It shows who went up there, when, and how long they stayed," Marcus said. "That's part 1. "And part 2? Evelyn asked. Marcus lifted his phone. "The footage." Hotel security couldn't hand over everything on demand, but they could preserve it. Marcus had requested an immediate hold, citing potential defamation and coercion at a contracted event. It was the kind of legal language that made businesses protect themselves first, people second. Another knock. This time Helen entered, composed as ever, a slim folder tucked under her arm. Her eyes took in Evelyn's tear-streaked face, and for a moment something human softened her expression. "Mrs. Whitlock," Helen said, "I'm sorry I didn't stop him sooner." Evelyn swallowed. "You said you brought a file." Helen placed the folder on the table and opened it. Inside were board minutes, authorization requests, and a printed copy of the Notice of Access Termination email thread, with a signature block showing who approved it. Evelyn stared. He forged board approval. Helen nodded once. And that's not the only thing. Marcus leaned over the pages. If this holds up, it's not just humiliation, it's fraud. Evelyn's hands steadied around her notebook. The fear was still there, but it was changing shape, turning into something that could stand upright. Helen looked directly at Evelyn. Security is pulling the hallway footage now. When we have it, we go back in front of everyone, not to argue. To prove, Marcus finished. Evelyn took a slow breath, then nodded. Then Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from hotel security. Footage secured. Graham ordered the AV tech to play it at 9:12. Come now. Evelyn didn't walk back into the ballroom to argue. She walked back to end a lie with a timeline. Marcus, Helen, and Evelyn moved together through the side entrance. Helen led because the room already respected her. Evelyn followed because tonight needed her face, calm, not pleading. Marcus carried the folder and the flash drive like a surgeon carrying instruments. Graham was still on stage, talking fast now, trying to joke his way out of the crack that had opened in his story. Serena stood rigid at the edge, eyes darting. Lorraine hissed something at Shanice, who kept filming anyway, too addicted to attention to stop. Helen stepped onto the stage and held up one hand. The gesture was small, but the room quieted instantly. Sterling Global's board chair is speaking, she said, and the microphones didn't dare fight her. Graham forced a laugh. Helen, come on, this is family drama. Helen turned her head toward him, eyes cold. No, this is governance and fraud. She nodded at Marcus. Marcus plugged the flash drive into the AV console at the side of the stage. The big screen changed. Not to Evelyn's tears, not to a montage, to a simple slide. Timeline of events. February 23rd, 9 to 9:15 p.m. Marcus spoke into the handheld mic, clear and unembellished. At 8:41 p.m., the hotel event coordinator requested AV restrictions targeting Mrs. Whitlock, calling her a liability. We have the audio recording and the names involved. Helen held up printed minutes. At 8:58 p.m., the board did not vote to terminate Mrs. Whitlock's access. The email claiming board approval is forged. Here are the minutes and the authorization log. The crowd shifted. People weren't whispering as much now. They were listening. Marcus clicked again. At 9:06 p.m., Mr. Whitlock's keycard accessed the AV booth. Here is the hotel access history. A new image appeared, the log sheet with swipes and timestamps. Graham's face tightened. That proves nothing. It proves opportunity, Helen cut in. Now we show intent. Marcus played the hallway footage. Grainy, real, undeniable. Graham's profile near the AV booth door, his voice too familiar, saying, "Play it at 9:12. Make sure she signs it." Gasps rippled across the ballroom like a wave. Even a few of Graham's allies went still, the kind of stillness that happens when loyalty realizes it might be criminal. Evelyn stepped forward and finally spoke, voice steady. "You told them I was admin to make me small. You tried to force my signature to make it legal." Marcus lifted the incorporation filings. And here is the truth. Evelyn Hart Whitlock is the original founder of Sterling Global. These are stamped filings, not opinions. Graham's jaw worked like he was chewing panic. Then Marcus leaned to Evelyn and whispered, "One last move. Take the microphone and reclaim the company in front of everyone." Evelyn took the microphone, but she didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The room was already listening with the kind of attention money gives when it senses risk. "My name is Evelyn Hart Whitlock," she said. "Hart is the name I built this company under, before I ever met Graham." She let that sit. A few heads snapped up. Some board members stared at the incorporation pages as if they'd suddenly grown teeth. Graham stepped toward her, hands open in a false gesture of calm. "Evelyn, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. You're confused." Helen didn't even look at him. "One more word, Mr. Whitlock, and I'll ask security to remove you." Evelyn kept her eyes on the crowd. "For 10 years I stayed quiet because I thought silence protected my family. I thought if I absorbed the insults, my daughter would never feel the blast." She paused, feeling the wedding ring on her finger like a shackle she'd mistaken for safety.
"But tonight my husband threatened custody to force my signature. He used humiliation as leverage, and he forged board approval to do it."
A murmur rolled through the ballroom, sharper now, less gossip, more outrage. People weren't watching a marriage fall apart anymore, they were watching governance collapse in real time. Evelyn lifted her leather notebook. "This isn't a diary, it's a record. Dates, receipts, messages, transfer amounts, access changes, everything he assumed I was too small to understand." She handed the notebook to Marcus. Marcus held it up like a sworn statement. Graham's mother stood, face red. "You ungrateful woman, after everything my son—" "Sit down," Helen said, voice flat as steel. Lorraine froze, then lowered herself back into her chair, shocked that the command worked.
Evelyn turned slightly so the cameras could catch her face. She wanted the world to see calm, not tears, boundaries, not begging. "This is what will happen next," she said. "Effective immediately, I'm requesting a special board session to confirm leadership authority and freeze discretionary transfers. My council will file to preserve evidence and pursue fraud charges. And as for custody, any threats made tonight will be documented, time-stamped, and submitted to the court." She didn't say "I hope." She didn't say "please." She said it like a woman closing a door. Graham tried one last move, stepping close, lowering his voice, attempting that private cruelty in public again. "You won't survive without me." Evelyn looked him in the eye. "I survived with you on my back." Then she handed the microphone to Helen and stepped off the stage. Not fleeing, choosing.
Marcus fell into step beside her, folder tight in his grip. The air felt different now, not warm yet, but cleaner. At the ballroom exit, 2 uniformed officers appeared and asked, "Is Graham Whitlock still on the premises? We have a warrant request pending." Evelyn didn't glow up the way people expected. There was no dramatic makeover, no revenge dress meant to scream. She chose something quieter, because quiet is what had kept her alive, and now quiet would carry the knife. In the service office, Marcus handed her a clean, cream blazer from a garment bag he'd insisted on bringing just in case. It fit like intention. Evelyn stepped into it and looked at herself in the small, smudged mirror above the sink. Her face was still pale from crying, but her eyes had changed. They weren't pleading anymore.
Helen watched her with a calm that felt like shelter.
"You don't need to perform strength," Helen said. "You only need to be consistent. Facts, sequence, witnesses." Evelyn nodded. "No speeches, no begging." Marcus slid a thin folder into Evelyn's hands. "This is the order," he said. "Start with the incorporation filings, then the trust voting shares. That's identity and authority. Next, the forged email and board minutes. That's misconduct. Then the access log and footage. That's intent. Finally, bank transfers. That's crime." Evelyn opened her leather notebook and added one line at the top of a fresh page. "Keep your voice steady. Keep your story straight." Outside, the ballroom noise had shifted. People were restless now, confused, hungry for resolution. Graham would be trying to spin it, to turn it into a misunderstanding. He'd blame Evelyn's emotions. He'd blame Helen's age. He'd claim Marcus was manipulating her. Villains always try to reframe evidence as drama. Helen checked her watch. "Security is positioned," she said. "If he tries to escort you out, the hotel won't cooperate. He already violated policy." Evelyn swallowed. "And Lila?" Marcus's voice softened just a fraction. "Custody stay is ready to file the moment he moves. His threat is documented. If he texts you again, we add it." Evelyn's phone buzzed as if on cue. A message from Graham. "Come back and apologize. You're destroying everything." Evelyn stared at it, then set the phone face down. "No," she said quietly. "He destroyed it when he used my child as a weapon." She slipped the notebook into her clutch, gripped the folder with both hands,
and rolled her shoulders back once, like resetting her spine into place. Marcus opened the door. The hallway outside was brighter than the service office, and the sound of the ballroom poured over them. Glasses clinking, murmurs rising, someone laughing too loudly to cover panic. Evelyn walked between Helen and Marcus, not rushed, not hesitant. At the double doors to the ballroom, Helen reached for the handle. Evelyn inhaled, tasting perfume and consequence. The doors swung open, and every head turned as Graham's voice broke mid-sentence, because the woman he called nothing had just walked back in, holding the truth. Graham didn't collapse gracefully. He lashed out like a man who'd only ever known control. He grabbed the microphone again, voice sharp now, the warmth gone. "This is a setup," he snapped, sweeping an arm toward Helen and Marcus. "They're manipulating her. Evelyn's been unstable for months. She keeps journals like a paranoid person. She's obsessed." A few people shifted, old instincts fighting new evidence. Serena stepped closer, eyes wide, trying to decide whether to defend him or save herself. Lorraine rose half out of her chair, ready to perform outrage. Shanice kept filming, but her hands trembled because she finally understood the camera could turn on her too. Evelyn didn't argue. She didn't need to. She reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. One tap. The audio from 8:41 p.m. played over the ballroom speakers, clear enough to chill the room. The coordinator's voice, the word liability, the plan to restrict her access. Then Marcus followed with the hotel footage again, Graham's voice saying, "Play it at 9:12. Make sure she signs it." The crowd's reaction shifted from shock to judgment. Investors glanced at each other like calculators. Employees stared at Graham like they were seeing him without the myth. Helen stepped forward. "Mr. Whitlock," she said, "effective immediately, the board is filing an emergency motion to freeze company accounts and remove you from any operational authority pending investigation. You are instructed to step off this stage." Graham's face reddened. "You can't do that." Marcus's voice came through the mic, calm as a gavel. "We can. The voting shares are held in Mrs. Whitlock's trust, and your so-called board approval email is forged. Your keycard access log confirms you orchestrated tonight's defamation." Serena's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at the audience, at the phones, the press table, the board members scribbling notes, and her spine went stiff with fear. She took one step back from Graham, then another, distancing herself like a witness stepping away from a crime scene. Graham noticed. He turned on her, furious. "Don't you dare!" That was when two uniformed officers moved down the aisle, followed by hotel security. The lead officer spoke loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Graham Whitlock, we need to ask you questions regarding reported financial misconduct and coercion at this event. Please come with us." Graham's eyes flicked to the exits, wild. Evelyn watched him steady. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stood there, present, while his story finally collapsed under real evidence. As the officers reached the stage, Shanice's phone screen lit up with a notification. "Live stream failed. Upload saved to hotel security server." The room didn't cheer for gossip anymore. It cheered because the truth finally had a backbone. Within minutes, hotel security escorted Graham off the stage, while officers took statements from Helen, Marcus, and the AV technician. The board members, who'd been whispering all night, were suddenly writing notes with shaking hands, because now the risk wasn't social, it was legal. Evelyn didn't follow Graham out. She didn't need the satisfaction of watching him beg. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, one hand resting over her notebook, and watched the crowd's faces change from doubt to discomfort to understanding. A few women approached quietly and said, "I'm sorry," like an overdue apology. One older investor, eyes wet, told her, "My mother worked invisible too. Thank you for standing up." By midnight, Helen had scheduled an emergency board session for 9 a.m. and issued a written freeze on discretionary transfers. Marcus filed an evidence preservation order and a custody stay before Graham's lawyer could even warm up a courtroom. The next morning, the bank flagged the shell company trail.
2 weeks later, Graham was charged, and Serena, who had smiled like a queen, signed a cooperation agreement that stripped her of her title and her story. Lorraine tried to call Evelyn 3 times. Shanice posted a rant. It didn't matter. The world that rewarded their cruelty had moved on to something it respected more. Proof. On a Tuesday afternoon, Evelyn picked Lila up from school like she always did. Her daughter climbed into the car, hugged her tight, and whispered, "Mom, are we okay?" Evelyn kissed her hair. "We're better than okay." They moved into a smaller home closer to her parents, a place with a sunny kitchen and a garden Lila could actually play in. Evelyn kept her job title simple now, CEO. Not because she needed the label, because she needed the protection it gave her family. She paid off her parents' medical bills one by one. She installed security cameras at her new front door, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. One night, Lila found the old wedding ring in a drawer. "Do you miss him?" she asked. Evelyn shook her head gently. "I miss who I thought he was, but I don't miss being treated like nothing." And for the first time in a long time, her house felt quiet in the right way, safe, honest, and warm.